How you doing?
I'm okay. It's been a long and tiring week.
Yeah.
Uh, it's funny because the answer to that question really would have been my body says I feel nuts, but my mind says I don't.
That's fantastic. Even if there's a little bit of a discrepancy there, that's a good, still a good step.
Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of the way it's been lately. Let me see. I guess it was starting on Monday, and then on Tuesday, that just kept getting noticed over and over was how, like, for instance, there's, some of the stuff I wrote you about,
Yeah.
uh, and some of the things that happened last Sunday, where there was this disagreement and upset and contention and all of this. Um, that stuff would come up, or other things would come up, and the mind, as soon as it started to happen, I mean, we're talking about the kinds of things that happen in less than a second.
Yeah.
There'd be a feeling in the body, the attention or the mind, whatever we want to call it, would immediately notice that, and then see how thoughts started to come along to reinforce that, to explain that, or
Yeah.
to say, oh well, I know that sensation because that's, over the years when that happens, it means this. So
Exactly.
I would catch one, then I would see the other, and it wouldn't be a problem, or it would come up and I wouldn't catch it immediately, and it would start to become a problem, and then I would, the mind looks at what's happening and sees it for what it actually is, as opposed to, oh, I'm scared or I'm angry or I'm hurt or whatever. It would
Hmm.
say, okay, hold on a minute, let's break this down. There's this feeling in the body, there are these thoughts about it, and um, that's all that it is. In fact, there are times where that was understood almost in words in the mind was, um, well, this isn't X. This is just this feeling in the body, and then these thoughts about it. And
Hmm.
it really wasn't a problem, or it'd start to feel like it was, but very quickly could stop it from heading that direction, because I could recognize that it wasn't fear about something, for example. It was just this feeling in the body and these thoughts about it.
Yep.
And it kept happening over and over and over. And Monday and Tuesday in particular, I mean, it's still happening, but it kind of fluctuates. There are times where um, it doesn't get caught, and it kind of goes on for a while, and then the body mind starts to, or not starts to, but gets caught up in it, and oh, I'm afraid, or oh, I'm troubled, or oh, I'm disturbed, or whatever it might be. And then after a period of time, there's this sort of this understanding that, well, you can wake up from this
Hmm.
and then see it for
Excellent.
what it is.
Yep.
Okay, here's the feeling in the body, here are the thoughts about it. But really, no, no, this is real. This is real. And no, this is a feeling in the body, and these are the thoughts about it. But this actually happens. This is a feeling in the body, and this is the mind talking about it. And you have to keep going back to that over and over to
Absolutely.
unplug that really tricky, sneaky, hooky thought, or thought sensation complex, so that I don't wind up going down that rabbit hole and becoming
Exactly.
so disturbed. And through all of this, I keep thinking about, Pernilla talks about it in a number of different videos about making something out of nothing.
Hmm.
This
Yep.
is making something out of nothing. Also
Exactly.
was reminded of, there's a short talk um, that I have saved from Tanisaro Biku, where he talks about selfing as an activity, and
Yeah.
it's a matter of learning to recognize what activities lead to selfing and stepping away from those activities. And like,
Yeah.
oh, this is what he's talking about.
Exactly. Exactly. Love that. Yep.
So that's what it's been like.
Fantastic. That's I mean, that is the practice, like that in a nutshell. That's exactly it. And that is how you are, every time you do that, you are reprogramming and
Ooh,
you are making it less likely that you're going to get sucked into it the next time and the time after that and the time after that. It is
nice.
really about just being, oh, right, right. And having that, I mean, it's a fascinating thing that we are such a multitudinous conglomeration of whatever this is, that you can simultaneously have one train of thought that's going, but this is real and I have to pay attention to this, and another much wiser train of thought, which is just as much present, that says, no, no, this is just making something out of nothing. This is here. Everything else beyond what is felt directly in that, raw experience of sensation, everything else is something that the mind is fabricating in this moment. And the same mind can know that also is completely swept up in the bullshit stories of, yes, but I really have to do this. It's just so utterly fascinating that we don't recognize most of the times how much friction and dissonance there is between those separate thought processes that are happening. So I think when we're doing this, we're kind of uh, strengthening that kind of meta awareness. That's the wiser part. That's recognizing, all right, we've trained for this. Breathe, feel. Here we are. This is what we've been working towards recognizing now as it's happening. You're okay. You're safe. Like it's that sort of meta awareness that does the reparenting work. That does the like holding and the comforting and all of that to the same freaking mind that's also there freaking out in the corner. That's stressing. It's like it's over there in the dark, stress eating, trying to comfort itself. And meanwhile, it's the same mind that has this other capacity to be able to also support itself in that way. And it's just absolutely fascinating. But really, I think what we're doing in that largely is that strengthening of that side, that higher wisdom part of our mind that is more becomes more and more well adapted to living in stressful human situations.
Well, that hearing you say that is also further motivation or an inducement to the mind to keep treading that particular path, because even though Wednesday and Thursday did not seem like they were as um, it didn't seem like maybe it was happening to the same degree or level, and it may have just been that it was starting to it was starting to become used to it. I don't
Mhm.
know. It was still happening, um, but it's been curious because in a way it kind of feels like having one foot, each foot in a different world.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
absolutely.
Because there's still very much all of the craziness and um, chaos that comes from all of the various things that are the kind of the current issues in our house. And I've thought more than once, what would this have been like 2 years ago or more? And I
Mhm.
can only just imagine how badly I would have handled it.
Yeah, yeah,
So, and I haven't, and that's a huge relief. And not only
absolutely.
has it not been handled the way it would have been once upon a time, but while I can kind of feel, I can kind of feel the wolves at the door, so to speak. It's not, it's not as troubling as it might have been. I mean, there's still sort of this, um, I don't know. I don't know how to talk about it, but there's sort of this some level of stress associated with it, because I was laying on the floor in here. Oftentimes I'll lay in here on the floor. We get a big rug, and I'll
Mm,
put on a podcast or something and just listen to it. And so I was laying on the floor with Sweetie nestled up against my head, and
mm,
all of a sudden, my body just started to shake.
mm.
And so I just kind of let it do what it was going to do, and it didn't
Nice.
go into it as fully as it can. I know it can, but it,
Mhm.
it did it a little bit, and I thought, well, maybe that's telling me something.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, what you talked about with the being in two worlds at the same time is very much what is meant when in Buddhism you say that samsara is not different from nirvana, that both of these are simultaneously here It's all in our approach to what we make out of the present moment. Having that experience where you are deeply embedded in the identifications of the mind and all of the stories and all of that, and I have to, and she shouldn't, and all of those things, that's samsara. That's really being stuck in the thick of it.
Right.
Having that elevated perspective where you can be aware of all of it and you're untouched by it, that's nirvana. It's all the same happenings. It's all the relationship to it and the identification and attachment with it. So that's exactly it. It's really starting to step out of that and recognize that you're still living in the same world, but your approach to it and your perspective of it can be entirely different. Oh, what did you say after that? Yeah, with the shaking in the body, fascinating. I mean, we never know necessarily, and we don't need to know necessarily what is going on in that moment, but it is great to be able to just go with it, let it be, do its thing. Something got, released, moved, blockages got freed. We have no idea, like there could be so many things that involved. It could be something that you were listening to on the podcast that touched something. It could be the position that you happen to be lying in that let something relax and something else started moving. Who knows, but it's always a good idea to just relax into that and let whatever happen.
Well, and it
Yeah.
started to happen a little bit last night as I was laying in bed with the lights off, about to fall asleep, and that wasn't really the best place for it because if it had just been allowed to just go, I would have woken up Susanna.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. There in 2020, I did TRE regularly for about 6 months, maybe a little bit longer. Um, so there's kind of the sense that the body's learned to do that, and so it
Hmm.
just does it when it feels like it needs to.
Yeah. It's great. Um, yeah, no, no concerns, just, potential benefits or,
Yeah,
yeah, just, interesting. I mean, we don't really ever know.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely no concerns. I mean, it's
no,
my experience is it's nothing but beneficial.
yep, yep. And yeah, I don't see you. I was going to say, some people listening, they might have that feeling that like, oh, that just happened. What does it mean? How do I make some you know, oh, I think I've just achieved something new by having this happen, or it must have released something, and I let me figure out what that thing was. What is different? And it's just not beneficial to go into the cognitive, explanations about it and remystification of it and all of that. Just let it be. It does what it does, and I think you know that. But just for anybody
Yeah,
who's listening that might be new to that sort of thing,
good
that's
point.
why we talk a lot about like even with the Kundalini stuff, just not making it into something, not making it into a big deal. Kriyas happen, these Kundalini experiences happen, but the whole categorization of it and putting labels on it and making it mean something else is an entire belief system of its own. And it's not necessarily beneficial for everybody to do that. It can be just allowing the natural processes in the body, the natural energetics of it to just do its thing. It knows what it's doing without the conscious mind forcing anything upon it or making any,
Right.
you know, extra meaning out of it. The intelligence is not in any way required for that stuff to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, and that's been my experience. Um, well, yeah, and the hazard is that when things of that sort happen, frequently the way they're handled is it winds up becoming it turns into just another thing that somebody can become,
Exactly.
and that's what we're trying to move away from.
Yeah.
Those are the habits we're trying to um, divest ourselves of.
Yeah. Precisely. It's amazing how many like ego bolstering and ego boosting traps have been built into the spiritual endeavor for people who are trying to rid themselves of the ego. It's just one new uh, achievement and award after another. So yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean, you know as well as I do, and many other people do, that there are just volumes and volumes of books written about that very thing.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and it, there's enough to deal with when it comes to this work without creating more, or creating more for ourselves or taking more on.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. I
uh,
completely agree. What else would you like to dig into? What
well, there's
feels
all the
relevant?
stuff that I've been emailing you about, and the way I have been looking at this because of how it arose was, um, going back, circling back to Fetter 2, trying to find what else is there because of the hints and indicators with working on Fetters 4 and 5 that there's still something else. And
Mm.
let me see, I can't remember everything I wrote to you about. Um, it's been that kind of week.
Yeah, I get that.
Between lack of sleep and everything else, I can't remember. I have to go back and read the emails again, but let me see. Hold on, let me get to the last couple of pages of this.
I tend to be
Uh,
this.
well, you know what? I'll do this. I know what let me see. Okay, leave a marker right here. Come back to that if I need to. Without having to refer to the journal, I can tell you that. And I don't know how much of this will have anything to do with the various back and forths from the last week or so, but at some point in time in the last few weeks, um, there was something happened. I don't remember what it was, but something happened that brought up this matter of, um, and I think I wrote this to you in one of the emails. I can't recall that. There's the whole bad guy, black sheep thing.
Hmm.
From what it looks like from here, in what in what I've been doing, it looks like underneath that is this more um, insidious and fundamental belief and understanding of you're no good.
Mm.
Just that just inherently, fundamentally, you're not any good. And I know
Yeah,
where that comes from because I heard my mom say it so many times when I was
yeah,
little. I mean,
yeah,
I heard that starting probably in second or third grade.
yeah.
And we know how it is, and Pernilla has even talked about it in some of her videos, that we get these messages when we're young, and we don't know, we don't
No,
know that that's not true. I mean, this is a parent, this is someone who's taking care of us, somebody who
yeah.
might, is an authority, and so it's just automatically assumed that they know what they're talking about, and if they're saying it, it must be true, and so it just
Mm.
got taken in hook, line, and sinker as fully as something can like that can be taken in. And
Hmm.
it kind of the way I started to notice it was I started to notice with other when interacting with other people, anyone, and
Hmm.
you might even go so far as to say everyone, there was this subtle sense of they're good, I'm not.
Mm.
And I don't know how my little kid mind managed to do this, taking the messages from my mom and turning it into that everyone else is fine, everyone else is good.
Hmm.
I, on the other hand, have only inherent badness, wrongness, flaws, whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's I started to notice that that's operational virtually anytime I'm dealing with anyone. And if there's some sort of conflict, it really comes up because even if I know that the other person is mistaken, um, it doesn't change the fact that um, I wind up confronted with, like, let's say somebody says, um, uh, Susanna says something about the fact that I'm upset, and I can
Hmm.
tell that it's causing problems for her. Well, even if it's perfectly acceptable form of being upset. Um, and it's not really causing anyone any harm, but because of her own background, she takes it badly and turns it into something other than what it is. Instead of being able to say, well, I know that there's nothing wrong with this. This is okay. These are just feelings that are here for a moment, and they're gone. You know, it's not having an impact on anyone other than the fact that they just are witness to it.
Yeah.
That's difficult, if not impossible to do at times, because that message of, well, you're bad. You just are inherently bad means that those feelings are bad. You know, and so I'm wrong, I'm bad, the feelings are bad, the feelings are wrong, the whole thing. And so there, you know, it creates a lot of shame and guilt and
Mhm.
other feelings around it. And it becomes really difficult at times, not always, but frequently it's difficult to um, be able to set a boundary and say, you know, I know this is okay. And you're
Mhm.
having problems with it because of whatever's going on your end. And
Yeah.
you know, I can't do anything about that. That's yours. That that frequently is not available because of all of these messages and these beliefs about these feelings. So anyway, the what it seemed like to me, the way it looks from this point of view, is that that is fundamental. Without that, in that belief in place, that self view in place, the whole thing about being the person who is wrong, the bad guy, doesn't really have a place to get a hold. It's built on a foundation of, you know, you're bad. You know, just
Yep.
inherently bad. I mean,
Yep.
it's just you through and through, all the
Mhm.
way.
Yeah.
Um, so that that's what came up, and that's kind of been my um, basis for operation and investigation in the last few weeks. And you know, the only thing I know to do is to just really lean on the affirmations.
Mm.
Um, and I've been doing that as much as I can remember to. You know, almost started to kind of get away from it, and it's come back a great deal since um, all of this came up.
Hmm.
Um, and there was something else in all of that, and I cannot remember what it was. Well, maybe it'll come to me later. But anyway,
Mm.
so that's sort of been, in addition to everything else, there have been other things going on. You know, there have been you know, things that we've talked about in the last few months. You know, looking at my own honesty was something that came up, and there are some other things that I've been trying to remain aware of, but I can't think of what they are right now. But that's sort of the biggie, and I don't know if that's the sticking point with Feder 2 or not. And I realize that that's not maybe that could be perhaps a problematic way of thinking about it, but just to be really simplistic about it, I'm just looking for rather what is, and I know, you know, we come back to these
Hmm.
things over and over and over for the rest of our lives, but what's the big linchpin with Feder 2? And
Yeah.
this could very well be it because of the fact that it's so fundamental.
Yeah.
You know, everything else really does seem to rest on it. And I
Yep.
don't know if that makes any sense to you, that the whole idea about being the bad guy, the one who's a problem, if there isn't that belief there that I'm inherently bad, that doesn't have anything to rest on. You know, it might
No.
be problematic, it might be uncomfortable at times, but it's not going to be something that's taken so deeply.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I think it's also important, though, that even those ideas of being the bad one,
Mhm.
remember when we talk about the first three fetters, that we talk about the foundational triangle, right? Like the three
Right.
of them reinforce each other. And this is one of those cases where having that idea of being the bad guy or being fundamentally bad reinforces that first fetter sense of identity because there
Yes.
has to be some consistent thing or one who we're discussing as being bad, right?
Right.
When your mother told you when you were 7 or 10 or 12 or whatever that you were just inherently bad, that child, even if that was true, clearly not, but even if that was true then, completely different being who is sitting here in front of me now.
Sure.
Where, so we do have to remember that when we have that fundamental understanding that has been locked in, that even if that were true, it's still not talking about anybody who is currently existing here now. So we can use that as our reminder to look back at what am I actually talking about when I say that I am, or that you know yeah, that I am bad, or that there's something about me that's bad. What is that shadow figure that we're talking about? There is an assumption. Are we talking about a habitual pattern of behaviors, which is always happening? Is that like, is it that there is a biological organism here, which we know is constantly changing and cells are dying, blah, 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 but that this particular biological organism has a pattern of behavior which is socially unacceptable? Are we considering that that is what it means to be inherently, that this one is inherently bad, right? Are we taking it at that level? Generally speaking, that's not what we're saying when we're talking about that. We might, you know, a parent who is, unthinking or unkind or whatever might say that, and when they do that, they're basically directing it towards this person who they see in front of them, and they're just blanket statement saying that you are wrong, you are bad, there's something wrong with you. But there is nothing consistent within that being that moves through time, even if there is, like, the person has some sort of a mental illness or something that makes them, hallucinate or see things that aren't there or whatever. Even that experience is changing enough. We can't say that there's anything wrong with that person or wrong with that experience. They're just having their own sort of uh, different from what the collective norm says should be kind of experience. But we forget to look for that. It's like there's so many different ways of getting at this. All right, fundamentally, you can go down like first fetter. What is it that we're actually talking about? And that can help to break down that second fetter assumption that there is something here, because that, again, from that first fetter selfing standpoint, we cannot talk about something and treat it real if it doesn't actually exist. So one way to approach it is looking at what are we actually talking about that we think is real when we say, I am bad, I have always been bad, the last 40 or 50 years of my life have been bad in some way. That being has been bad. Where is that being? Show me right now what that being is, which can be categorized either as bad or good. You know, even for a moment, entertaining the idea that such a thing exists as bad or good, we can bring it to the level where we just look for what it is that even has an inherent attribute. What is it that could be deemed good or bad, or any other adjective that we want to add to it? That alone does a lot of heavy lifting in having us in the moment recognize that that is an absurd notion, because there's nothing there that we can attribute it to. If we take that sort of first fetter exploration out of the way, just put that aside for a moment, then we look at it, like I was saying, where, okay, so maybe there's a biological organism that has a certain pattern of behavior, but that biological organism with a certain pattern of behavior never reacts the same way all the time. Even if that was true, you could say, well, maybe it has less socially well adapted responses in some situations than in others. But fundamentally, that person is probably not a raging monster all the time. Every moment, whether they're awake or asleep, they're just constantly making trouble for somebody or themselves. Probably not the case. We don't have really many people who are like that, right? Like
Right.
that's an extreme level of dysfunction. So you can look at it logically and you can say, in terms of that, belief that there could have been somebody there and still is somebody who is fundamentally problematic in that way, we can look at where is the consistency, that is there any time that I'm not acting in a socially maladaptive way, in an antisocial, like, am I ever kind? Am I ever happy? Am I ever delightful? If one of those instances exists, it invalidates the whole sub, you know, proposition that you are inherently bad.
Mm-hmm.
So we can have those reminders that convince ourselves to again undo this programming of I am bad, I'm bad, I'm bad. We're reinforcing, well, actually, I'm not always bad. If we're even considering that bad and good are still possibilities, we can still use it in that way and be like, oh, well, actually, I rescued a kitten. I was, really, really kind to my neighbor. Whatever. We can use these things to help basically build a case against the that idea that we've been harboring for so long. And so we can work at it slowly that way too. But we can also undermine it by recognizing that the very idea of bad or good has absolutely no basis in anything. That, like, whenever we define something or give it some sort of an attribute, it's always in relationship to something else. It's always relative. So
Yeah.
the problem is when you're a child and you get told that you're bad, you're not asking compared to what. You're not even asking specifically, what have I done that's bad? And worse yet, you're not making the distinction that behavior is different from being. And that's really where the problem lies. Maybe you had behaviors that your mother considered bad. Maybe you did things, maybe you shaved
Mm-hmm.
the cat instead of, rescuing it from a tree. Like, you might have done things which, cause suffering to people or animals around you. But even at that, the behavior we might determine as being bad, but it doesn't indicate that the being itself in that moment is inherently bad. It has just learned a bad behavior. It's done something against somebody else, and we consider that as a society to be a bad thing. So by that definition, it has some problematic behaviors. The issue is that we start to take it on that I have occasional bad behaviors. I am fundamentally bad. This,
Mm-hmm.
it not only creates the identification and it creates the self, but it artificially colors that self with negativity. Instead, we can look at it that we all have flaws. We all have moments where we do things which we later regret. We do things that harm other people. We feel bad about it. We resolve to do something better in the future. It's the way we learn, and it's the way that we grow. But there's a difference between recognizing those behaviors versus taking that fully on to say that I am fundamentally bad because I did something and made a mistake. It's really that reminder that we have to give ourselves all the time that my the sense of being, again, to kind of reinforce the I there for a moment. But, if we say that there is this inherent being here, that cannot be defined solely by its actions or a cherry-picked group of its actions. So we want to reinforce that if there is anything here that we call a fundamental being, that it is not definable based on its actions. It is um, it's aware. We can't even say that it's directing behavior because behaviors are always caused by a multiplicity of causes and conditions, right? The being itself does not have the choice to act differently than it does, right? This body is going to act, it's going to say one thing or another, and it has no choice as to what that thing is going to be.
Well, a couple of things.
Yeah.
Um, and these two things may sound like they're contradict each other. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first thing is, yeah, that was the understanding. It wasn't just behavior. I don't know if it was growing up in a Catholic household with the idea of original sin or what it was.
Yeah.
Somehow it was taken as, you know, it was the idea that I got was that you're just somehow essentially, fundamentally, and inherently bad, not good.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't matter what you do, even if you do something good, you're still underneath all of that, not any good. Now, here's the nice thing about it though, is that I'm seeing it, but it doesn't really feel like um, as I'm aware of this and working with it, it doesn't seem I can't think of any time where it was really taken on. It was just sort of an under something that was understood as okay, so this is something that has been carried around all of these years, which
Mhm.
leads to the second thing, which is that you know the last part of our conversation last time we spoke was about working with these things and seeing how they are uh, just impersonal processes.
Yeah.
And I've been keeping that in mind the entire time. Plus, I've been applying it to all kinds of other things as well. Seeing, going about daily business, seeing that, well, this is just an impersonal process. There's no one doing something. This is just
Yep.
impersonal processes, and behind that is a lot of what you said and a lot of things I already understand about that because of all of the years of reading, studying, and listening to things about Buddhism. Uh,
Yeah.
so anyway, in dealing with this second fetter issue, it's more, it's taken as this is a program that operates at times.
Mhm.
Like I said, I started to notice it in dealing with other people, dealing with somebody, and there's that, it's kind of a subtle feeling when it comes up. And it ties back to that other thing I've told you about. I mentioned it a couple of times over the last 2 years, where I see other people as, even if they're the same age, which is frequently
Yeah.
the case, see them as older, more mature,
Yeah.
wiser,
Yeah.
more in a position of authority, and it's related to this. And so, as I'm seeing this in action, I'm understanding that, oh, well, that's just conditioning or a program that
Yeah.
has turned on and is operational in this context for this
Yep.
period of time. Meanwhile, um, I don't know that I've ever, I don't know that I've done anything akin to what you've described about, analyzing it logically and seeing the reasons why it can't be true. But I have, in addition to doing the using the affirmations, I also recognize that we've got a world full of people who do really screwed up things, and I've done some things in my life that I regret, uh,
Mhm.
but I'm not any worse than anyone else. So
Mhm.
if other people get a break, if other people are given forgiveness, then I'm certainly deserving of those very things, and there's no reason to take the stick to myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also when you like, I'm curious, like you had said, the example that you given before about when you're talking to Susanna and then, she gets upset about something and then you immediately feel that, it's your fault. You should have done something differently. Or when it goes immediately to that feeling of inherently being bad, what is the actual process in that moment? Do you see that, she's upset about something? Do you immediately feel that similar constellation of sensations in the body that you felt for many years that has been associated with that being the bad guy? Do you have specific verbal thoughts that come on that are there? Is there a visual, like, sort of visual representation of what Darrell is in its kind of negative uh, characterization? What is your actual internal experience regarding that in that moment?
Well, it didn't occur to me or it didn't come to mind to look for mental pictures because I do. There is there is some degree of a conditioned habit of response to notice, are there mental images, are there thoughts? And I don't know that I really looked for the thoughts either, but I have noticed that um, there are those familiar sensations in the body, and the feelings of um, being wrong and feeling guilt and shame and possibly even regret. So I
Mhm.
have noticed those things. Couldn't tell you about, like I said, any kind of mental imagery or any thoughts. And the thought thing is kind of tricky because I have been watching for that because there's long been this question when it comes to this work we're doing of our thoughts, are they always very clearly, distinctly heard words, that have been rendered in
Mm.
language? Well, no, they're not. And I've been looking for it enough that I'm seeing that there is something that is thought I mean,
Mhm.
I wouldn't know how else to label it, that shows up, it's in the mind, it's in quotes heard in the mind, but it's not quite words, but it is
Mhm.
thought because
Yeah.
I can tell that it's somehow describing things to itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so there probably is some of that. I would have to make it a point to look in those situations. So anyway, long-winded answer. All that to say is the only things I can tell you for certain are the bodily sensations and the feelings of guilt, shame, regret.
Yeah. I should preface this by saying also there is a possibility that there are times that you are, wrong, or
Oh well, sure, sure,
right. So,
yeah,
so
and that's fine.
right. I just want to, when I say this, it's one of those things that I think some people could hear as being like, um,
Mm.
they kind of use it as a way of just being like infallible. Like, see, I'm never wrong because it's all just relative, and
No,
get out of jail
no.
free card. So I don't mean it to be used like that, but
No,
once,
I'm very open to being mistaken because that's one of the great things about the time in AA is I've learned the intense, very deep, profound value of being able to recognize and own up to um, when I'm wrong about something.
yeah, yeah, it's super powerful and really helpful.
Hmm.
It is it is something where we can kind of misuse the teachings if we're not careful,
Oh,
and
sure, we see it all the
just
time.
bypass, exactly, really bypass, and think we're so much better and nicer people than we really are. But that being said, it's when we have this fundamentally flawed attitude that we are just always bad. It's like,
Right.
if we come from a very neutral standpoint where I don't think that I'm either a bad person or a good person, it's much easier to freely evaluate each event that has passed and then see, okay, well, that wasn't really very skillful, and I'm going to try to remedy that in the future, or, yeah, that was actually, I'm glad I behaved that way in that time. That was actually really nice. Good.
Yeah.
We don't have to get hung up on either, but we can see it from a much more neutral, unbiased perspective. The problem is that we have to undo all of this old wrong teaching that you
Mm.
are fundamentally starting from it in the negative. You're always in the red. And then, maybe you do a few things that bob you up a little bit closer to even keel, and they still never quite get there because you just keep falling back down to the bottom. That's not healthy, and it's not true. And it also makes it so that you're less likely to be able to accurately evaluate your behavior because you're starting from a fundamentally, negated starting point.
Right.
Um, it's so hard when we talk about these things because the whole range of internal, like, thought formation can be so different. It's such a spectrum for everybody. Um, so So I know exactly what you mean by that. There are some thoughts that are verbal and then other thoughts that are not quite verbal, but they're almost understood as, like we know them even if they don't quite make the threshold.
Yeah.
Um, they still need a certain amount of awareness, right? Even if we can't absolutely hear them, it still really helps to get the feeling that is being evoked because it's doing so much work creating that sense of the moment and the way that I
Right.
perceive myself in that moment. So even if you can't discern the actual words, notice if there is a visual component because that's often, a possibility that you have like it might even be like a silhouette. Like it doesn't have to be a fully formed mental image of Darrell, the bad guy with a villain's mustache and all that. But like it could just be this sort of present of the body, um, like an image overlay of the body, which is like a stand-in
Hmm.
and represents that. And just to notice that that is happening, because the more we're aware of the different components that are adding up to this experience of the moment, the less power they have.
Right.
The less they add up to the meaning of I am bad. You can just see, oh, there's an image of a body. Okay, so what? There are verbal thoughts and there are maybe subverbal thoughts, but you get the gist of what's there.
Hmm.
Why do you think that that's true? What impression do you have that you have to give that any credence whatsoever? It's just because the thought arises. Squirrels can use toilets. I don't know. Just completely random. Like, now, why does that have anything to do with this moment, with Susanna being the way she is and me feeling the way I am? Why does that have to be given any sort of validation? Just recognize it. In that recognizing, it starts to pull apart all the things because, like we talk about all the time, you're going to feel something in the body. So you
Hmm.
allow yourself to feel that and notice that these thoughts are not directly part of that experience. The whole experience of feeling bad is not one monolithic, force. It's a couple sensations in the body, some verbal or subverbal thoughts, some mental images, and then two people in a room together. That's what's there. Break it down to its components, and they lose that overlay. And that's really what we have to do over and over again. Um, I think it helps to come at it from a lot of different angles because you've it's something that has been ingrained for so long. And some of it
Hmm.
is going to be sort of stored in the body. Some of it is stored in the mind in terms of the 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 belief system and the formulation of the way that you view whatever this is and the way that you view everybody out there. That has just been ingrained over and over and over again. And so I don't think it's going to take just one way of looking at this to completely dismantle the entire foundation. It's something where you come at it from each angle when you see, oh, I'm seeing that person as being somehow older than me, even though actually they're 5 years younger, or that I see them as being, somehow bigger and up there, and I'm 3 inches taller than they are. When you notice those things, just take a moment to take in the actual experience of what's there. Oh, this is what people being the same age looks like. This is what people being the same height looks like. That age and height do not even equate to wisdom or maturity.
No.
All of those things are built on conceptual assumptions. So as soon as you notice that this one is online again, you just question it. Snap up to that meta awareness that we've been talking about, where you just recognize there's a thought that says that person is somehow older and bigger, and notice the way that that is represented in the mind. It's not happening out there in the real world, right? You're not
Right.
literally seeing them as being like 4 feet taller than you and older and all of that. What you're seeing is not a complete abstract hallucination compared to what is actually there. The mind is sort of skewing it in a way that you're it's like when we take something in, and this isn't 100% true, but because the mind is literally fabricating all of it in a way, but setting that aside, setting the six fetter stuff aside for a moment, it's always tough when we talk about this because it's like it's contradicting something else always. But coming down to where pretending that what we are seeing is a real, actual, valid world out there, and our experience, the way that we normally walk through life, is that I am viewing a world that really exists. That person, is the way that I see them. But what we often fail to recognize is that there's immediately a sort of recategorization or re-representation of that in the mind, right? Your relationship with the person who you are speaking with, your mind is sort of refabricating that experience. When you have the sense that somebody else is older than you or wiser than you or bigger than you or any of that, it's not happening in your direct experience of the world. It's happening in the mind's recategorization of it. And we're often completely unaware that that is happening, or we're aware of it, but we forget to notice and acknowledge that it's not actually the real world. It's like, if you're watching TV and you see a celebrity that you really love, that that experience of recognizing a person and then putting on it all of the roles that you've ever seen them play and all of the love that you have for them and the appreciation and all of that, that is this reconceptualization that's being added in the moment that has nothing to do with a person's face on a TV screen. But we ignore the fact that this is something which is being added on to experience all the time. So we become aware that when I am interacting with somebody and I suddenly feel in some way diminutive, I feel like I have been shrunk down and they are whatever. Notice in my direct experience, we are the same height, we are the same age, or they're older than me, or I mean, I'm older than them, or whatever it is. Recognize the reality of that in the room, and then also recognize that the way that you are experiencing it is a mental re-representation or recategorization of it, and then question, first of all, how it's showing up so that you're aware. Are there mental images that are actually portraying you in your mind as being really short and they're suddenly really tall? Are you, um, I mean, it could be any number of things, but become aware of how that discrepancy is known. And however that is, then you just be in that awareness of it. It starts to break down the inherent realness of it because you suddenly see, the wizard behind the curtain. It's like you're the illusion is being broken because you become aware of what's making up the illusion. You can also actively question it. You can see how this mental representation differs so much from your actual visual experience of standing above this other person even, and let that be this constant counterbalance to the assumptions that the mind makes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm just trying to really take it in fully because what I found is that if these things, when we're talking about them, these sorts of little practices or whatever we want to call them, are taken in with a great deal of attention, that they have a real strong tendency to just start showing up on their own.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's an automated thing. Yeah, I always love Shinzen Young's analogy of the different robots. I always
Mm.
forget them, but it's that you have the bad robots and the neutral robot and the good robot and I forget what the highest robot is, but it's like all of it. It's acknowledging that all of this is an autonomous kind of programmable machinery in a way, and
Yeah.
you're either in a habit of creating, lots of suffering when the bad robot is, basically at work, and then you have these more positive robots, and the sort of highest one or the best one is where it's completely autonomous. You have the one part where it's like it feels like you're doing, when you first start getting into meditation practice and inquiry practice, and it's like consciously remembering, right, okay, I become aware that, I've fallen into the trap of yelling at the cashier again. I'm taking a breath, I'm looking at it, I'm looking at the, sensations that were there, and it feels like it's very intentional, and there's a lot of agency involved, that like I am willfully remembering to do this practice, and I'm willfully remembering to look for the self every time I feel like I'm selfing, and that can ironically feel like, I am the one doing it. And then you get to the point where it's so ingrained, it's just another habit, that every time a selfing little bubble arises, the selfing detection program just kicks on automatically, and it's like boop, boop, boop. There's a selfing's happening, and then it looks at it, and every time you start to get that bubble of irritation that comes up, the aversion detection alarm goes off, and it just immediately looks at it, and it's just that automatic. So that is what we're
Yeah.
training, is this automaticity of inquiry, basically.
Yeah, and that was the thing that was really remarkable about what I described experiencing on Monday and Tuesday, is how that was happening, and having it come to mind again and again that it's all just impersonal processes. And uh, actually, you'd said something some time ago about the good robot, and that phrase, knowing what it was pointing to, that phrase would come to mind occasionally. And there were, in all of this, and thinking about it, being, kind of aware of the fact that these are impersonal processes, there were moments where, in going about doing things, there it became something that was happening um, without anyone being involved, and so there was this lightness and ease, even, and it wasn't an overwhelming sort of thing like, gosh, that feels so great. It was just this subtle lightness and ease as this was happening all on its own, doing things, and there wasn't anyone doing anything. It was just things were happening.
Mm.
Hand reaches out and grabs, you turn, you walk across the room, and it's just all unfolding on its own quite naturally. And it would just happen, little brief moments of it here and there. Um, and it wasn't anything that was a big deal. It was nice. It was a pleasant experience, but more importantly, it was just the recognition of, well, somewhere on some level, this stuff is being understood um, at a level that's not just purely intellectual.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. And
So, and there's no expectation of where it's going to go. It's just,
no,
hey, well, things have developed to this point, and making it a point to appreciate that, that's what's happening.
exactly. That's great. Um, yeah. And I think it is the way that you're going to have the most benefit at seeing through that, or benefit isn't really the word. The most success maybe at seeing through the bad guy idea, because it's when you have recognized all of these different ways that it shows up, and each one kind of has its own little detection system in place.
Mhm.
There's no way for it to catch on the way that it used to,
Hmm.
right? You're going to be hopefully sooner and sooner aware of it right after it happens, or just before it starts to happen, and then it never really has that believability that it once had at that point. You've seen
Um,
through the guise, you've seen through its disguise.
right. You see how the trick works.
Exactly. Yeah,
So it's impossible to believe that the woman is actually being sawed in half.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, are the what's the word? Hang on. Are the affirmations still a valid practice at this point in time?
I do think so. I do think that there's a lot of that
Okay.
because that's also we're programming the subconscious as you do that too. So
Right.
the the words today. Wow. The
Uh-huh.
task is not the word that I'm looking for. The techniques or the things that we've been talking about are largely either conscious or involve like a inquiry based looking, which I think has deeper, ripples into the subconscious. But it's also something where we are kind of being consciously we are consciously made aware of something. We are recognizing it with the conscious mind. We are, feeling it with the body. We're experiencing it like this, and hopefully that will filter down into the more subconscious understanding. But the affirmations also kind of go directly to that. You're also re-brainwashing the system basically because it was brainwashed the wrong way for so many years. So the affirmations are just counteracting that, which is absolutely helpful in continuing to just support the process. I wouldn't say that that's the only thing to do, but
No, absolutely not.
it's definitely part of it. I think, like I said, it's something that has been so ingrained in so many ways that the more different approaches that you take from different angles to dismantle it, the better.
Okay. Huh. um, so I mentioned this, I think I did, could be wrong, but I seem to recall mentioning this in the email. Her birthday was last weekend, like I told you. And
Yeah.
she had, again, I can't remember if I told you this or not. I think I had, that she told Susanna that she didn't want me there.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I was okay with it. We start to get closer to Saturday, and then it's funny, I don't know that I was really upset about that. What it did is it seemed to kind of um, re-stimulate or recapitulate the whole business of my role in the family growing up with being bad, being the bad guy, being the one who's the problem. And it brought a lot of that up.
Mm,
That's actually where where it really came clear, this that more fundamental belief about just being inherently bad. It shone a very bright light on that. It brought it out in very sharp relief.
mm,
Um, and so it, it wasn't without its use or benefit to have that happen. And God, there was something about that I was going to say that was leading to something, and I can't remember what. Um, anyway, the even bigger picture is that it seems like time and time again, what happens for me in life is being put in positions where I either have to learn to let go,
mm,
to allow things to be, and to be at peace with it, or suffer and
mm.
pretty strongly.
Yeah.
And so it as much as there's a part of me that wishes it wasn't that way, there is another part of me that understands that, it's funny because as much as it's spoken of in Buddhism, it seems like it's the Taoists who really do the best job of talking about. I think the way it was put in one of the, I forget what they're called, but in the Tao Te Ching,
Hmm.
something to the effect of, this is not an exact quote, but the mastery of life is not in the grasping, but in the letting go.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's really sort of the um, big picture idea that I keep um, keep having my nose rubbed in.
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of those particularly obvious examples where you just don't have much recourse.
No,
There's just acceptance. And obviously, like I said, being there in whatever supportive role you are allowed to have at any given point, you jump to the occasion should it arise. But otherwise, it really is just observing and accepting. And it especially, again, it would be different if your relationship with her had worked out differently, but
mhm,
she is going to take any forward, you know, movement from you as like aggression. That
mhm.
that so it really is the very Taoist, just sitting and waiting and allowing for her to come to you if need be.
Well, I know what it was I was going to say a moment ago. You reminded me of it. It's that when all of that was going on Saturday, um, during that period of a couple of days where everything was stirred up and there was this feeling of hurt and anger, um, there were these inclinations to move towards saying something to her about it,
Mm,
or um, just kind of cutting her off and not doing anything for it. It's like, you need my help? Sorry, can't help you. You got the
yeah,
wrong guy.
yeah,
And at one point, I had almost decided that that was the way to go. And then it shifted back. And what I find myself doing is, um, doing things to help her, being there for her here in house, supporting
mhm,
her.
yep,
And no matter how awful she may think I am, which is a strange thing because on one hand, we know what the nature of the relationship is. On the other hand, there are times where with the interactions, you wouldn't know that that's how she feels about me. I mean,
mhm,
she'll still come to me for help and things like this.
yeah,
And so, I do whatever I'm needed to do.
yeah, and that's
And there's a part of me that really didn't want to go along with that for about 24 hours. The thing I was thinking about was this line from this song where it's sung that how can I turn the other cheek? It's black and blue and torn,
yeah,
and finally had to realize, well, it doesn't matter.
no,
It's irrelevant. It just doesn't matter.
yeah,
Um, the only thing that can be done is to keep a detachment so that there's none of this business of responding or reacting to any of the negativity on her end,
yep,
and then be there and be helpful and supportive and understanding in whatever ways I can. And that's where it's at now.
exactly. Yeah, it takes the self out of it from your perspective,
Oh, yeah, you're right.
right?
Yeah.
If we really want to selflessly be there for the people around us, it really is that we can't have any needs for them to reciprocate things or to approach the relationship in a way that I would like for them to approach it, that they give me what I want out of it. You really have to be able to accept just being there for her as she needs it on her terms in this case, and recognize that it's probably not, at least, well, it's definitely not now living up to the expectations or the way that you would like for the relationship to be. But we don't know in the future. You can, like I said, remain open to it may not. Wait and see what unfolds. But putting terms on it that she has to approach you in a certain way or that she has to give you what you want from the relationship in order, we just know it's no good comes from that in this case. And you're uh, it really is. This is that part of that selfless practice of just being the bodhisattva, just being there to help out as not just a parent, but also just a kind being in the world that you're there to support if she needs something, but also recognizing that she's probably not going to reciprocate in the way that you want at this point. It's just,
No, there's really no expectation of that anymore, especially after going through the process that presented itself over the days around her birthday.
yeah,
You know, I mean, first of all, I can't control anything. I cannot manage any kind of result. I mean, that
yeah,
is truly impossible. Never mind the non-dual underpinnings.
yeah,
I mean, that's even more true. But if we're going to look at it on the relative level, there's still there, there's no way to wrest any result from this.
yeah,
And the wisest position is one of no expectation. No
yeah,
expectation at all. I mean, there are things like, okay, well, she's 18, but she still lives here, so she still has to do housework and
mm,
help out and things like that. And so that's I guess you could call it an expectation. But anything beyond that, really practical, day in day out type stuff, no. I mean, it's just like you said, it's going to lead to nothing but problems. I mean, there's
yeah,
already enough, her mind is already conditioned enough that anything I do is just going to lead to more of the same.
yeah.
So I just try to keep a polite and kind distance.
Yep. I think that's the best approach at this point. Because you also know, I mean, we talk about the bubble of reality all the time, that it
Yes,
doesn't really matter what your intentions are. She is viewing it through her own conditioning. So
that concept has been really helpful in the last couple of weeks.
good.
I have to remind myself of that one a
Yeah.
lot. And it's
Yeah.
good because in reminding myself, it helps to instill it more deeply. It becomes something that's better understood and is more natural rather than just being this mental event.
Yeah. Good. Did she say why she didn't want you at the party? Was she
She gave a
specific?
number of different reasons, which none of them really held water. I mean, the first one she gave was that I'm going to tell her how to eat. And it's like, you know what? That couldn't be any further from the truth because starting in the summer of 2023, when she started having all these health problems,
Yeah.
and I'd take her to the doctor, and I've taken her now to several doctors, and they'll say the same thing. You need to drink water. You're dehydrated.
Hmm.
You can't eat food like that, and maybe occasionally it's fine, but you can't eat stuff like that every day. And to the point where she's been, we're getting it, we're getting it reconfirmed. But the last diagnosis we got was that she has some sort of autoimmune disorder, and I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of it is fueled by the absolutely horrid diet that she has.
Mm.
And so I started seeing then that I can't. Anything I try to do just creates problems. And so I had that was the beginning of the great letting go because that was really hard to do. It reminds me of the old AA saying that anything I let go of has claw marks on it.
That's great.
And
Yeah.
so, I had to learn over many months to let go and let her do what she's going to do. And so I don't say anything about anything she eats. So the closest I get to that is, hey, I'm making some salad. Do you want some? Even though I
Hmm.
know she's going to say no, or
Yeah.
things of that nature. Anyway,
Yeah.
and but I don't say anything about what she eats. I decided a long time ago it's none of my business, and
Yeah.
so that reason doesn't really wash.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't say anything.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. She clearly has her reasons, whether they're something that she can, and it might very well be that she's just picking any excuse to basically give credence for what she feels inside.
Yeah, I think so.
And, and we don't know. So yeah, I mean, I'm sorry that the situation is the way that it is. It doesn't sound like it's going to be a healthy situation for her at all, but we just have to hope that it is a growing and learning experience, which, hopefully yeah, yeah.
Hopefully.
You don't want to see somebody willingly walking into what very much looks like a really potentially dangerous negative situation.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I know what it was I was going to say. Uh, Something that I think about a lot is, and I say this because it has gradually been becoming true over the last couple of years. Um, and I may be butchering the exact quote, but the Buddha was recorded as saying something to the effect of, "We can learn to live happily among those who hate us."
Mm, yeah.
And
Yep.
that's the only thing for it at this point.
Yeah.
Learning to let go and deepening this practice in the path. Okay, so with regard to the second fetter and the belief that has been uncovered or seen clearly recently, um, what you were saying, suggesting as far as how to deal with that was to become aware of how that's showing up in the moment, and then try to look at it from as many different viewpoints as possible.
Mm,
Now, one
yeah.
of those viewpoints was what I just mentioned about the um, becoming aware of it in the moment.
Hmm.
What else did you suggest? What else was there in addition to that, or was that about it? Because I can't recall.
Yeah, no, there's a few different things because you have the recognition of the one which well, okay, going from the sort of first fetter standpoint, you have the sort of first fetter inquiry of who is it that is believed to be the fundamentally bad, wrong one. What is that universal characterization pointing to? Who is that one who is supposedly has been bad since the time that they were 5 and are still bad? What is that? Like, I know coming from the Christian background, it's like the idea that the soul is fundamentally flawed. And so it's very easy if you come from that to go, well, there's this inner essence in you which starts out being dirty and wrong, and you need to have some external salvation to hopefully grant you okayness. And then maybe, you'll get a reward at the end if you do the right thing. And that is taken into consideration that there is a real substance in there which can be either good or bad. From this perspective, that makes absolutely no sense. I mean, for one thing, we can't figure out what we even mean by a soul. We don't know if that refers to anything real anyway. No matter what kind of inquiries we do, no matter what science has discovered, we cannot find something which seems to be an ever present, self existing soul. So that fundamentally is a problem. The idea that it could be fundamentally good or bad is something which makes absolutely no sense because again we can take it then from the perspective of what does good and bad even mean, that there is a relativity to that these are all just descriptions based on cultural assumptions and expectations, and that there is nothing that is fundamentally always one way. Your even if we talk about like your skin color, you're going to be out in the sun during the summer and your skin color is going to change. You're in the winter inside all the time, your skin color changes. Like, there is nothing about you that stays the same from moment to moment. There is no description we can give of you that is going to that label is going to adhere to. Um, so looking at it from the logical perspective, like I said, anytime that you recognize that I have done something good or nice or whatever, letting that also be similar to the positive affirmations, that's pointing you back to, oh, right, if I am truly bad all the time, truly bad people cannot do good things sometime, right? Or they're not just truly fundamentally bad. It's a contradiction. So seeing that, and there's one thing to see it and to know it consciously, but then really let that like filter into the body. Like, what does that mean? Like, when you feel that you are wrong, there's a physical sensation in the body. And then, like I said, you have these, mental images or vocalizations or something which are leading to this idea that, right, that is what it means for me to be a bad guy. Let the idea that actually I was nice. maybe that makes me a nice guy. Don't let that just stay in the mind. Let that filter into the body. What does it feel like if you are actually a nice guy, a good guy? How does that feel for you to harbor that belief? And it's going to be telling because either you feel the kind of open, relief, spacious kind of feeling that comes with the idea of being a nice person or a good person, or you're going to feel some sort of like contraction that resists against it and says, no, 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 that's not me. That can't be true. In which case, it's another indication that there is this deep level of belief about your inherent goodness that's at work here, and that needs to be questioned because that when you feel that tightness or that tension that resists the idea of being good in some way, okay, you can ask like, what you could ask, what proof do I have that that's true? And really look like, what proof do I have that I'm always a bad person or that I am inherently flawed? And see if anything comes up to form that. But also when you feel that contraction, you can ask, what would it mean if I was actually a good person? Because there might be something that idea of being a bad person is actually still doing for you. It
Hmm.
might be scary to give up the role of being a bad person because for any number of reasons, but it could be giving you license. I know you're not, going out robbing banks and, all that stuff because you just figure and hey, I'm a reprobate. There's no salvation for me. So screw it all. I know that's not the life that you're living, but there might be something that you derive from that characterization that would be at risk if you fully were able to let that go. So if something arises when you are think of yourself as a good person and something arises to contradict that feels, oh no, 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 can't let that happen. See what you're afraid of. See what might actually come up that is keeping you locked in that belief.
Hmm.
Um, and then, yeah, what was it? I think there was another one, but basically, oh, and then we had talked about like the relativity of good and bad being
Mhm.
you know, a reasonably usable label for anything. We can really dissect, just like we dissect the concepts of craving and aversion. We can dissect the idea of something being good or bad inherently. That there is a cultural, social relativity to all of it. And what does that even mean on an ultimate level? You have a, a being which is acting completely in tandem with the ecosystem in which it exists. It is only acting the way that it does because of all of the conditionings of every input that it has taken in from infancy and or really in the womb and beyond. The hormones in your mother's body when you were in her womb and the hormones in her mother's body when she was in the womb are all still affecting your choices today. It sets up the system in a way where you do not fundamentally have control over the way that you view the world because your system, your nervous system, and your whole biology has been shaped by forces which were never even close to in your control. I mean, they were literally generationally derived. And then on top of that, you have every influence that has been, the family that you happen to have been brought into, the education system that you happen to be born into, the friends that you happen to have had, the enemies that you happen to have had, all of the influences that you've ever seen, every TV show that you've ever seen, every movie, every book you've read, all of that has influenced this system in such a way that it believes the things that it does and it behaves the way that it does. There is no inherent being in there who can choose to do something differently in any situation that is somehow completely dissociated from all of the conditioning that has happened before. It is physically impossible. So the idea that you could be bad or good and are acting in a way which is like intentionally against what you know to be a good thing. It's absurd. You can only act the way that you act. And as we've been discussing, every time that you become more aware of what is happening, when you're having a reactive episode or when you're starting to feel one of these things, that is changing the conditioning that just further enhances the likelihood that you're going to act in more so pro-social ways, healthier, more culturally approved ways. And you've been doing that your whole life. You've been in this steady process of becoming what we would call a better and better person. It just means the system is changing.
Right.
It's changing in a way which we culturally consider to be a better, more well adapted, stable person. But again, that's relative. If you were in another society, in a different thing, you might, becoming more like heartless and cruel and more like inclined to give your life for your religion might actually be a really well regarded, respected thing. This is the society that we're in happens to consider this to be a positive human trait. It's not universal. So recognizing that even that is not uh, a fundamental mark of your existence, that this is a cultural happenstance which cannot be in any way separated from the society and the culture and the ecosystem in which you exist.
Mm, man. It's not really a new idea, although it's very helpful to hear. But it is hearing all of that kind of enumerated um, at that degree. It just kind of makes your head swim.
Mm, yeah, yeah, I get it. And it sounds like you've been doing really well with it. I mean, you've had a lot going on, but it sounds like the practice is really becoming more and more automatic and instilled. And so it sounds like you're doing the right thing.
Well, thanks for that. It's nice to hear that kind of reflected back to me. It was an interesting experience seeing it happen, not only because it was really clear that it was all happening of its own accord. There wasn't somebody who was doing it. It was just,
Mhm.
that there's that idea again. It was just impersonal processes. But and it didn't get turned into any kind of personal something or well, look what I've done. That wasn't the case at all. It was never viewed like that. But there was this sort of sense of um, well, it feels like something's shifting.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's the way to say it or not. I mean, if it isn't, that's fine. If it is, that's fine too. But
Yeah,
it was just, the idea that something was developing or deepening. Um,
yeah,
I guess it feels good to see the effort and energy that's been invested coming to fruition.
yeah, yeah. I get that. I do think it's, a lot of times it's very subtle. We're as long as we're practicing, we're having changes, right? There's no way for anything to just stay the same. And so it is changing, but a lot of times it's a little bit more subtle than we're able to be consciously aware of. So it's when we start to have those moments where it's like, yeah, that's really different, and then you start to really notice like, huh, yeah, that actually seems, yeah, I don't remember feeling like that before, and then we get those moments where it's clearly deepened enough or changed enough that it becomes, unquestionably different from how it used to be. Or that we go, oh, I think a shift happened, or I think a shift might be happening. I think it's happening all the time, but it's just when we reach a new kind of plateau of like, oh, yeah, that is definitely not the way I was just interacting with that same situation, 6 months ago. Yeah, okay, something's different here. So,
Well, the one of the real clear clues for me was that, and it's still not 100%. It's something that still needs development over time. But being able to experience thoughts as something that it wasn't something that was um, inherently true or real or had substance. Thoughts were just
Mhm.
these things that the mind generates, and they have relative degrees of truth, and they
Yeah.
come and they go, and it's better not to um, buy into them. To see
Yeah.
that happening was made it clear that something was going on. Plus, it was really encouraging too, because that's been kind of a point of frustration. Um, because up until just recently, um, thoughts still had way too much reality and authority, and now that's beginning to change.
Amazing. Excellent.
Whew.
Keep up the good work. All right. Thank you so much, man. Good luck with everything. I'll
Thanks.
talk to you soon.
Yeah, talk to you after a while.
Yep. Bye.